10 years ago, if you look at those photos on the bottom, we started seeing this disease roll in, and it's Impatiens Downy Mildew. Now, we won't go into a tremendous amount of detail about that disease. We're going to talk about what we need to do in the production, in the growing facility to make sure we manage that. But, oftentimes we saw some plants show up a little, foliage starts to yellow a little bit. And in the landscape, we ended up with just skeletons of plants. But, thanks to some new introductions from Pan American Seed introduced the Beacon series of Impatiens, and then Syngenta introduced Imara XDR. These are the Impatiens Walleriana, who are historically extremely susceptible to Impatiens Downy Mildew, but these are more and highly resistant to that disease. So what does that mean? That means we can produce these again. Our consumers can have that rock solid color in the shade. Okay, so a little bit of caution, and this is kind of what we saw this year. A lot of folks got really excited. They brought in some of the Beacon, they brought in some of the Imara, and they had a bunch of other varieties. Maybe they're Imprezas or they're Super Elfins, maybe some double Impatiens in there. But you know what? It's in Impatiens Walleriana, it's the Beacon and Imara that we need to concentrate on because they're the safer ones to produce. Doesn't mean they're completely immune, but they're a lot safer and a lot less likely to be affected by this disease. Other varieties you're pretty safe with, the hybrid Impatiens like the Sun Patiens and Bounce, the New Guinea Impatiens, those are okay to grow as well. It's these Impatiens Walleriana that we really need to select a disease-resistant series. Now, just because we have a fix or a help with one disease, don't forget about the other big conditions that can infect Impatiens. The one that comes to my mind is Impatiens necrotic spot virus, or INSV. That's transmitted or vectored by thrips. So, to think about that disease management, we have to think about pest management. We have to think about sanitation. We're going to have another talk here in the next few sessions about sanitation more in depthly, so stay tuned for that. I'll also ask Bill to post some other information where we've talked about sanitation in the past, but it is critical to pest and disease management, so keep that in mind. Let's talk about Impatiens Downy Mildew just a little bit more, and then we'll get into producing Impatiens. But I want to talk about reducing your risk, okay? And like I said, you really should be growing a high-resistant variety like the Beacons, or the series like the Beacon. It is your safest, it's the most safe method you're going to have, okay? If you have some of the others out there, they can bring that disease, are much more susceptible. That disease could transfer over to the high resistant series. The high resistant series may not die, but those others, they could be, vector that in there or bring that in there. It could be a problem. Okay. So if you're growing the vegetative Impatiens, things like the Fiestas or maybe the Rockapolcos, those are Impatiens Walleriana, double Impatiens. Those are highly susceptible as well, okay? You really should grow anything that's highly susceptible to this disease in a separate greenhouse from your resistant varieties. Again, it just makes sense. You're gonna, reduce your risk by growing them separately, so it's a pretty good plan to have. Another really good plan to have is, even if you are growing the resistant varieties, you need to have a rigorous integrated pest management program. Okay, this is sanitation, this is scouting, this is preventative sprays, this is curative sprays, introducing the appropriate biological controls. So have a rigorous program. Speaking of that, one of the things that you probably ought to do with Impatiens is have preventative fungicides. Now, I'm not going to go into detail about this, but in previous webinars, Will Healy and Ball Technical Services with me went really in depth with this guideline you see over here on the right, Impatiens Downy Mildew Guidelines for Growers. You can find that on our Ball Seed website. We'll also post links to it in the show notes here as well. But he went really into depth about different types of chemistry. So we all know it's good to rotate, right? But through this exercise with Impatiens Downy Mildew, we've been watching and learning from the past few years. We've learned that, chemical applications just aren't chemical applications. You need to have the right chemical. You need to think about whether you're spraying or drenching it, because as I have here in one of the notes, we found the same chemical that could be labeled as a spray or used as a drench actually gave us better longevity when it was drenched. Okay, we need to think about, is it contact or is it systemic or locally systemic or translaminar? All those have an effect on how and when you should apply them. For instance, a contact chemical, a fungicide, may kill, what's right there active on the existing leaves. But as new leaves unfold and grow each week in impatiens production, the new plant, the new tissue leaves won't be protected if you had just previously used a contact fungicide. So do your homework on that, check into that webinar, and get yourself really educated about that and building your arsenal, because you really do need an arsenal for this particular crop. All right. Part of disease management when it comes to Impatiens Downy Mildew, and it comes to any disease, the pathologists talk about the disease triangle, where you have the host, you have the pathogen, and you have the environment. Okay, it takes all three to have a disease really become a problem for us. So one of the things we can also do as growers is not just have a good fungicide rotation, but let's talk about our environment as well. Okay, we want to reduce the humidity in our crop when we can. So reducing your relative humidity to below 80% is critical. Okay, some of the things, so that means probably some natural ventilation or some heat to drive off your crop. But of course, that means managing other things that affect growth with that. So you've got to think about that holistically. You also want to avoid wet conditions, especially late in the day or at night. And what this means is there's no late day irrigations. When we water late in the day, the plants go into the evening time. When the temperatures cool a little bit, that means the relative humidity actually increases as temperatures decrease. We get more free moisture, we get disease conditions. So do not water late in the day. Make sure your plants are going into the evening time, the nighttime on the drier side. We'd want to irrigate in the morning, not the evening. So try to implement that strategy. Another really good thing we can do is just get good air circulation. Growing flat tight in packs, well, that's kind of what we have to do. But that means as soon as that canopy comes in, we should be having our program set up where we can move that crop readily or get better airflow movement through there through horizontal airflow fans or some type of movement, natural ventilation, or if we can, space a crop. Okay, so those are things we can do to help control the environment to make the disease less susceptible.